Hello, good morning. It is Joni Rotten. I am bringing you an article from Time, and the title is Early Puberty Soared During the Pandemic, and Scientists Don't Know Why. Should take us 7 minutes to read this. It says, so why is that? This is from August 7th of 2023. Italy noticed it first. It was the first country to lock down during the COVID-19 pandemic, and later in 2020, researchers at Florence Anna's Mayer Children's University Hospital were the first to point out a puzzling trend. More young girls than ever had been showing up to the hospital with clear signs of early onset puberty. The cases weren't unique, but the frequency was. Since early onset or precocious puberty first gained widespread clinical attention in the 1990s, it becomes steadily more common worldwide. Defined as the appearance of secondary sex characteristics such as breast, pubic hair, and vocal changes, and other signs of biological maturity in girls 8 years or younger and boys 9 or younger. Precocious puberty has been difficult for researchers to attribute to a single cause or mechanism, but a mysterious pandemic-generated spike in cases in Italy and beyond have provided experts with a new opportunity to revisit their dominant theories in hopes of an answer. Case studies have now rolled in from clinics around the world, many of whom saw at least 2 or 3-fold increase in precocious puberty diagnosis after March 2020. In China's Henan province, Henan province, for example, doctors at 22 facilities saw 5 times more cases in 2020 than they did in 2018. More recently, documentation has turned to inquiry. There's no conclusive answer about what causes premature development. Their research shows that the constellation of factors at play includes stress and trauma, as well as lifestyle habits like poor diets and lack of exercise that are tied to weight gain in children. In many countries, pandemic measures saddled children with this exact package of pressures. It's no wonder that precocious puberty rates have soared. The burden of our early puberty. Precocious puberty is most often diagnosed in girls simply because, quote, puberty in girls is more visible, says some pediatric endocrinologist at the Loma Linda University Children's Hospital, who's authored a 2019 paper reviewing treatment options for precocious puberty. Growing breasts for many girls is a public experience, and in spaces like the American school system, developing early can mean a minefield of unwanted attention. Then there's the distress of watching their bodies evolve, which can be jarring even for those old enough to have received proper context and education. Quote, first and second graders, they're not mature enough to handle this type of body change. That's a big stress for a young girl. Perhaps as a result, early puberty has been linked to mood disorders and some behavioral issues. Aside from the psychological repercussions, precocious puberty can also put children at risk years later for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and certain reproductive cancers. When signs show up early, often around age 6 or before, it can be treated with hormonal puberty blockers. Though some cases are easily traceable to a genetic or anomalous causes, like an ovarian tumor setting off hormone production, precocious puberty has most often been linked to obesity. Decades of research have found that childhood body weight, often classified by body mass index, body MI, is a strong predictor of menarche, is that how you say that? Or the onset of menstruation in particular. The mechanism is often assumed to be hormones such as leptin, which grows more concentrated during puberty, but is also produced by fatty tissue. A study published in 2012 found that BMI data was able to account for 40% of the variation in when girls begin their periods. Early menarche is also associated with lower birth weight, as well as a rapid childhood weight gain, supported, well, supported by the theory that physiology of body composition could govern the mechanism that kicks off puberty. Childhood obesity is a growing problem worldwide, which can help explain why precocious puberty has also remained on the rise internationally. In her clinic, she says parents sometimes ask about another possible cause, whether chemicals in our food, environment, and everyday items are affecting the production and expression of hormones in the body. But although they might play a role, many studies have tried and failed to identify any meaningful connection between specific substances and chemical classes and the early arrival of puberty. Other exposures, too, have been suggested. The page itself is blinking and doing things. I'm not touching it. Other exposures, too, have been suggested to make an impact. Inclusive research have explored a potential link between electromagnetic fields emitted by everyday devices and altered endocrine function. My family brings different herbal products. They bring different vitamins. They ask about different foods, different diets, and I tell them I don't have an answer because I don't have any evidence. Instead, she reinforces the importance of proper nutrition for a healthy child development. The connection between stress and puberty. Still, none of this sufficiently explains the explosion in precocious puberty during COVID-19, and the newest wave of research has instead zeroed in on stress as a key driver. Stress was linked to early puberty before the pandemic. Though there's little evidence, it's a clear cause. Childhood sexual abuse is associated with the appearance of secondary sex characteristics as much as a year earlier in girls, as a number of them, as are a number of other environmental factors that are easily tied to stress, such as parental absence and race-related weathering. What the heck is race-related weathering? In 2020, researchers saw cases skyrocket. While locked down, kids faced the stresses of a lifetime, leading to renewed interest in uncovering the specific mechanisms of action behind these stress factors. Quote, "We know from recent data that psychosocial burden before and after the pandemic is increasing dramatically." Okay, I wish it would stop doing that. Some other person in some other place in Italy. When he saw the spike of precocious puberty in young girls at his clinic in 2020, he says, "My first thought was focused on lifestyle changes related to social isolation." In his latest study, published in the Journal of Endocrine Society on August 3rd, he and his team identified lifestyle changes as contributing factors that many children face during the pandemic, such as poor eating habits, decreased movement, impaired sleep, and excess screen time. Their study, which looks at data from more than 100 girls suspected to be in precocious puberty from January 2016 to June of 2021, found that the patients seen during the first 15 months of the pandemic, nearly 90% had stopped all physical activity. Because many of these lifestyle changes are linked to obesity in children, it's difficult to tell whether they contribute to the onset of puberty by altering BMI, stress levels, or both. But the pandemic provided an ideal experimental setup for endocrinologists to examine. Well, lucky us. The key, he believes, will be to compare data, quote, from different countries who underwent different models of lockdown and protections. Isn't that also very interesting? Which could help highlight the effects of certain stressors or lifestyle changes more than others. It is, it's also possible, they write, that the pandemic simply meant that parents spotted signs of precocious puberty earlier due to being confined with their children. Researchers aren't sure yet whether or not the increased rate of precocious puberty has continued now, years after lockdown, but anecdotal evidence from clinics suggests that it has. They believe that this is because people, including children, have not returned to their pre pandemic habits. This is becoming normal now, she says. In the long term, the biggest impact will be psychosocial for sure. Now, what's really interesting is I've been reading and I have more. I'll read more. Like they said, a lot of they're not sure why. Is it screens? Is it the food? Is it the lack of movement? Is it chemicals and PFAS? But no test, possibly because it's a little bit of everything. But stress, they want to say, stress, de-stress. De-stress. A stress is linked. Wow. I'm not so sure because we've had a lifetime, eons of stress going on. And so for the pandemic to be the most stressful thing that's ever happened, I don't know that I buy that. And we're having children in other countries who are overly stressed with what's going on. So is the stress the trigger? I don't believe that for a second. Now, could it be a mix of all of these things, like a big soup mix that is having a chemical reaction or a hormonal reaction into the bodies of these young girls? That's possible. But I do find it completely interesting and worth continuing to explore why early puberty soared during the pandemic and how come these scientists don't know why. Something's going on to our little girls. Something is happening to our little girls. And I'm very curious as to what. So I think I put the link in there to this article if you want to further read it. That's it for this disturbing episode of Rotten Reads. Tell me what you think. Tell me your thoughts. Any ideas of further research, things I could go search for and look into. Have you been hearing things as well? And in a world that seems so focused on, the maturity of our children at younger and younger ages, if you know what I mean, the map of maturity, it's these things that really sound disturbing.